Welcome to the Dietitian Side Hustle podcast. My name is Katie Dodd, and I'm a nutrition entrepreneur. I spent 7 years as a side hustler before diving into entrepreneurship full time. Before making the leap, I was bringing in 6 figures through my side hustle. If I can do it, you can too. This podcast is for dietitians, interns, and students who want to be inspired to start or perfect the side hustle of their dreams. Let's do this. Episode of the Dietitian Side Hustle podcast, Speaking Opportunities for Side Hustlers. Now, way back when I did a podcast episode talking about webinars, but I wanted to talk about speaking opportunities more specific to in-person speaking events, because we've made it so far out of the pandemic that we're starting to see more and more in-person events come, and my goodness, speaking gigs, such a wonderful side hustle opportunity for dietitians, but then also it could be an additional stream of income. Maybe you have a private practice, or you have a blog, or you're a freelance writer. You can do speaking as an additional stream of income. The wonderful thing about speaking is that number one, it's a fun place to highlight your expertise, to educate other people and kind of take what you're passionate about and pass that on to other people and help and serve them in big ways. But then it's also a really nice one-off side hustle, right? You can apply to as many or as few speaking engagements as you'd like to. And when you get a speaking gig, it's really just a one-time thing, right? Preparing for it, doing it. There might be follow-up after, but it's not like a long-term gig, right? It's just kind of a one-off thing that you could do as a hobby, as a way to make a little extra income here and there, or again, as an additional stream of income. Being a speaker is really wonderful because it really puts you ahead as an authority in your space. I know that we all have very different niches, very different things that we specialize in, but when you are speaking in front of a big audience or a small audience, speaking in front of any audience, you're putting yourself out there as the go-to expert. It's a way to build up your resume. It can add some more legit stuff to your website, add it to your LinkedIn, and it's also a wonderful way to network, you guys. So often you can speak at one conference, one in-person event. Someone might hear you, recommend you for another one, and it could just kind of start that spiral. So it's a wonderful way to build your network. And man, our network can open so many opportunities that we never even thought were possible. Not just other speaking gigs, but maybe other freelance writing gigs, maybe other business opportunities. So I've said before that nothing beats the power of an in-person event. I love in-person. And so for the right person, speaking opportunities are the great side hustle. Now, I understand that some of you, the idea of speaking in front of an audience is like the worst thing ever. And you're like, not on your life, Katie. That's okay. You know, if you like speaking, you could always do webinars. It's like you're just talking to a screen. That feels safer. But if you don't want to speak, you know what? The beautiful thing is there's so many different side hustles that you can do. Find something that resonates with you. Don't do something that leads you to terror or anxiety, right? But I know a lot of people do enjoy speaking. I used to be very, what is the word? I used to be scared of public speaking. I didn't like that I was scared of public speaking, so I'd do it anyways. But even to this day, I've gotten better and I'm much more comfortable speaking publicly, but I get shaky, I get sweaty, I might get a little anxious. I intentionally do not hold paper, because if I hold paper, you're going to see that I'm shaking like a leaf up there. It's so funny because I'll be up presenting and then later someone's like, that was amazing. I'm like, oh, I was kind of nervous, and they can't even tell, right? So I just kind of want to say that as well. If you're feeling like, oh shoot, I get nervous, my palms sweat, I get a little shaky. I think a lot of people do. I think that's just part of being in front of a big crowd. But I think when you go from the perspective of, I'm not here to be perfect. I'm not here to have people critique me. I'm not here to be, every single answer on this topic, understanding that I'm here to help and serve people, help them think differently, help them do differently. I think for me, that's when the game changed and I got a lot more comfortable with public speaking. Another little side note I'm just going to share here too. One of the things about me is when I get really nervous, sometimes my brain goes blank. And so in my early days of public speaking, both webinars and in person, I would actually write out a script for everything I was going to say. So I would actually have word for word exactly what I was going to say. In the event that the brain goes blank in front of all those humans, I can read. So if you're someone who's like, man, Katie, I really would love to be a speaker, but I just don't think I can be. You can be. You absolutely can. If it's something you want to do, you might have to figure out different things that work for you, maybe taking notes, maybe, whatever that looks like for you. But we get better at things by doing them over and over and over again, right? So let's talk a little bit more about speaking opportunities. I guess we're going to talk about kind of where to find them. We'll talk about all the things. But when it comes to in-person speaking engagements, holy cow, the sky is the limit for all of the opportunities out there. You just have to know where to find them. So again, this is going to vary based on like what you do, right? Who you serve. I like to think of, I kind of like lumping it down on this way of thinking within the field of healthcare, right? If we think of just dietitians, maybe we want to teach something to other dietitians. I do a lot of presentations for dietitians because you guys are my audience, right? So thinking of our National Nutrition Conference, we have the Food and Nutrition Conference and Expo. We also have today's Dietitian Symposium. That's a really big national conference. But then think about the state conferences. Every state in the United States has an affiliate. So for the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, so there's the Oregon Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, California, Washington. I'm West Coast. You guys know that. But, every single state, they have conferences, in-person conferences now that we're coming out of the pandemic. And depending on where you live, some of these states actually have local not just the DPGs, but local affiliates, right? So I know when I was in California, you had the California Dietetic Association, but then you also had like I think they call it like the Northern Valley Dietetic Association. I'm not quite sure. I know over the years, the different names change, but thinking of the one national, the 50 state, and then the who knows how many local just within nutrition. But start thinking about all the other healthcare organizations that do conferences too, right? So thinking about doctors, nurses, physical therapists, occupational therapists. I can go on and list all of the different interdisciplinary healthcare teams, but they need dietitians too, right? They need to learn about these nutrition topics. They also have national, state, and probably local events and conferences in person. And then even thinking of like, there's organizations that are maybe disease specific, like the diabetes organization, or maybe something related to oncology or something like that. So depending on what you do, it's going to come down to doing your research and finding out like, what are these conferences? When are they? And how can I get my foot into the door to speak to them? Now, I know I'm talking about healthcare organizations, but depending on what you do, there might be other places you speak. Maybe you're going to be speaking like as part of corporate wellness, and you're going to be speaking to businesses, like doing kind of more employee wellness kind of things. Thinking about at the local level, you can speak at your local library, maybe a school, maybe the local parks and recreation department. I didn't realize that a lot of local libraries have budgets where they can actually hire someone to come in and speak about a particular topic to the community. And to me, I'm like, what better person than a dietitian to come speak at that library talk? So a lot of it comes down to thinking outside of the box and getting really creative in who has opportunities, but also who you can pitch opportunities to, right? I mean, you could always put something out there. I always say the worst someone's going to say is no. The best they'll say is yes. And you'll be like, holy cow, it's on. So finding these speaking opportunities, I think the first thing you need to do is make a list of the organizations, meetings, and events that you possibly could partner with based on your niche and what you do. Always try to think outside of the box, think about the unique skills and things that you have to offer, your areas of expertise. And so I actually have on my website, the dietitiansidehustle.com, I have a page called Side Hustle Ideas. And I actually have all the information I'm talking to you about now if you click on the webinars and speaking button. So I'm going to go read from a sample I put up here. So I wrote this sample just to give you guys an idea of what it would look like based on your specialty. So y'all know I'm a geriatric dietitian. So an example of who I could potentially partner with as a geriatric dietitian and start reaching out, finding speaking opportunities, whether or not they are pre-planned events, or maybe I'm pitching them about, hey, you want me to speak to your audience? It could be the Food Nutrition Conference and Expo, the State Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics conferences, other healthcare conferences like MDs, RN, social workers, PT, OT, PharmD, psychologists, even dentists, even registered dental hygienists, like sky's the limit. Meals on Wheels of America or other community nutrition organizations. I can speak to long-term care organizations, caregiving organizations, home care organizations, the American Geriatric Society, AARP, Silver Sneakers, Dementia or Alzheimer's associations. So I hope as I'm just sharing that one example, it's like the wheels in your head are turning of like, oh yeah, all of these places I could like maybe find opportunities and find gigs. And I think one thing to be careful of is sometimes we just assume that an organization doesn't have like either we assume they do or they don't have the budget for a speaker. And I always say never assume, never assume, because they probably do. Like I said, the fact that libraries have budgets, like, the sky is the limit and all you got to do is reach out. So how do you actually secure a speaking gig? So my first tip is to create a list of all the places you could reach out to, then start looking on their websites. So when you're looking on their website, look for a few things. Look for events, look for call for speakers, speaking guidelines, work with us. Those are all different places that you might be able to find these opportunities, because sometimes you're dealing with, like, let's talk about the state conferences for within the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Now, most of these states, they have a specific time every year that they have their conference, a specific time every year they do their call for speakers. So some of this is a timing game. So you might have found out, oh shoot, the conference is next month, but the call to speakers has closed. But that's okay. You could know for applying for next year. Make a nice Excel spreadsheet to track all of your things. But if you know, okay, here are all of the events that I would love to speak for. Here's when they do their conference. Here's when they do their call for speakers. You be on it. When that call for speaker comes out, you apply, right? And like I said, you could always reach out to them and just send an email and, see if you can talk to someone about what opportunities that you can collaborate with, even outside of specific events. So when it comes to getting the gig, right? So you found an opportunity, you applied, they accepted. So what does it actually look like once you've secured the gig? Now, a couple of different things. I think the first thing I want to tell you is always make sure you have a contract in place. And that's important to protect you and to protect the organization. Most big organizations are going to have contracts, but I always just really like to emphasize that, right? Because also miscommunication happens. People forget things, and you could have this conversation and then they forget it, and then later you're like, well, shoot, now they're not going to pay me, or they're not going to pay me what they said they would, or they're wanting more than what I said I would do, or we want to make sure we have in writing a contract that's mutually beneficial for us and them. Now, I will say it's important to understand contract language so you understand what's in that contract. But if you're ever confused about a contract, about what something is saying, do not sign it. Go back to them and ask, can you clarify what this means? And I remember when someone told me contracts are meant to be changed, contracts are meant to be edited. That really opened my eyes, because sometimes we think if someone sends me a contract, I either have to sign it to take the gig or I don't get the gig. But you can always go back and ask if they're willing to edit and change things. And what that might look like for you is maybe you want to make sure that you continue to own rights to your presentation. You want to make sure they're not using your face, your name, and likeness in perpetuity. I can't say the word, but forever, right? So make sure that if you do have a contract, make sure you have a contract. Then make sure you read the contract, understand the contract, get clarity in areas you don't understand, and come back and modify things that you don't feel comfortable with. And worst they'll say is no. And if it doesn't align with what you want to do, then you can always pull out, right? So always have a contract. When it comes to figuring out your pay, I guess let me say this. Different organizations work different ways. Sometimes an organization has, here are our guidelines, here's what we pay you. Example of this, Food Nutrition Conference and Expo. I spoke for them in Washington, D.C., way back before the pandemic, and they have a set way of how they do things. They pay a flat rate to their speakers, and they give you free admission to Vinci. Now, travel, all of that, hotel, that's what you have to cover yourself. That is what they pay. So sometimes you have an organization that has set guidelines. Other times, it's up to you to say, here's what I want. Now, a couple things to ask for. The differences between an honorarium and travel. So an honorarium is what they're paying you to speak. The travel pay is paying for you to travel. I will say if you're doing in person, be mindful that your honorarium doesn't just cover travel, right? Because then it's like, okay, you got paid this amount of money, but it cost you that much for the flight and the hotel and your food. And essentially you're just working for free because it's going to take you time to make the presentation. Your time to travel is valuable, right? And then doing the presentation and traveling home. So I do recommend, if it's something local and you're going to go to anyways, that's fine. But I always recommend ask for honorarium and travel if you're able to get it. But again, it all depends on the situation. Maybe this is an audience that you want to get in front of for networking. And you're like, you know what? I was going to travel and go to this conference anyways. The fact that they're paying me to speak, that's the cherry on top. So anyways, I just kind of want to throw that out there, is that you can ask for honorarium and travel. Different places do things differently. So you got to, have conversation, talk to them. I think my biggest recommendation for you is don't feel fearful and asking for what you feel you are worth. Don't worry about someone thinking you're greedy or like pulling back the deal of like, who do they think they are? It's all about negotiation. These things are meant to be negotiated. So be confident in your rates, and they'll either come back and say yes, or they'll say, you know what, that's not quite in line with our budget. Can you do this? You have to decide, is it worth your time? If not, respectfully decline, maybe help them find someone who would be a better fit for them. Or, if it falls in line with something that works for you, you can take it. So, okay, what else did I want to say? Let me think for a minute, guys. So if you are selected to speak, make sure that you have a contract, make sure all of the finance stuff is like arranged ahead of time, right? Like don't sign a contract and then later talk about money. Make sure that's in the contract. Make sure you clarify who's covering the cost of travel, and don't assume anything, right? If it's not in writing in your contract, it's not. Just don't assume anything, guys. Get this all in writing. So then once you have your contract in place, you're happy with all the terms, then you just make your presentation, you practice, you go do your thing, and you have fun, and hopefully it opens the doors for more and more speaking opportunities. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this was helpful just to talk about some, different ideas for speaking. I love speaking at in-person events. I mentioned I spoke at Fancy earlier this year in 2022. I actually had the opportunity to speak at the Oregon and Washington Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics Conference. That was super fun. I will say I did speak at that event for free. Let me tell you why I did that. I did that because I actually am on the board of the Oregon Academy. I'm the business development director. That's like the sponsorship chair. And I just didn't feel comfortable being on the board and accepting payment. And I will tell you, I have been volunteering on the Oregon Academy board for a long time. I've been the president. I've been all the roles. I am very passionate about Pacific Northwest dietitians, and it was my honor to be able to volunteer my time to share my knowledge about side hustles with this audience. And also, there was still the benefit of networking, right? I'll actually say I did actually have a booth there. So instead of getting paid, I was paying to be there. But this was an organization that I'm very passionate about, people that I love, and it was a business opportunity and business expenses and tax write-offs. But I would not speak for free at any other conference outside from, this organization that I'm, so closely linked to. Let's see, where else? Next weekend of the time that I'm recording this. No. Okay, next weekend. There we go. I always have to remember when I record this and when they go live. When this goes live, Nutrition BizCon is going to be happening just in a few days. So Nutrition BizCon is an event that I'm speaking at. And, I kind of mentioned before about when it comes to finding speaking gigs, it's thinking outside the box. Nutrition BizCon is something that I came up with my friends Javier and Marissa. And so we're doing it ourselves, right? So that's how we're getting paid with this one, is we created it, right? You don't always have to partner with someone else. You can always make your own event. And then actually, I'm really excited. I was selected to speak for Today's Dietitian. What is it called? Today's Dietitian Symposium. Next, I believe it's in May. Oh my gosh, I should know this. I feel like there's so many things spinning around in my head of what I have going on. Yes, Today's Dietitian Symposium is in May of 2023, and I'll be speaking there about side hustles, and I'm so excited about that. So if you'll be at Today's Dietitian Symposium, I'll be so excited to see you. So I definitely love in-person speaking events. I do a combination of in-person and webinars. for where I live in Southern Oregon, it's a small community and there's not a lot of speaking opportunities here. So I do have to travel to speak. Sometimes it's nice to find somewhere that I can travel to speak and then, make a little vacay out of it. That's always nice too. But lots of opportunities for side hustlers for speaking. And if that's something that really resonates with you, if you've never done it before, that's okay. You can do it now. Just get out there. The more you do it, the better you're going to get, the more confident you're going to get, the more doors are going to open. And yeah, I love speaking. So thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I hope that you guys have an amazing week and we'll chat next time. Bye guys.